Welcome back to Nurture. So today we're going to be discussing a topic that some of you may know is really close to my heart, cancer. I am absolutely delighted to be welcoming Emma Campbell with me today. So there are about 1 million mums in the UK currently living with cancer, of which 100,000 of them have young or teenage children. And we're two of them, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I cannot wait to hear your story, so I think we're just going to delve straight into it. So where did it all start?
Okay, so it started 8.5 years ago. I had my son who was nearly 7, and I'd just given birth to triplets. So I'd had IVF, triplets were as a result of IVF. My body had obviously gone through a lot of kind of medication and hormone treatment and stuff. I'd had a lump for years. I'd had it checked in my breast. I was always aware of it and niggled me, but been reassured several times that it was nothing. Had the IVF treatment and was really aware of changes in my boob, but I was expressing milk round the clock. I was exhausted.
Were you just thinking it's hormones?
Well, you just think, and my body had changed. It was quite a stressful time for other reasons, so I got much skinnier than I normally am. And I just thought, well, it's just obviously down to all of that.
Things, yep.
And then one night, in the middle of a night feed, I felt a lump under my arm. So that side, and that was the kind of moment of, oh, a lump. I'd sort of been ignoring the changes, and then the lump under my arm immediately made me think of my lymph, and that was when I finally went to the doctor.
And were you diagnosed were you diagnosed straight away?
I was diagnosed. I remember it was a kind of. I went to the doctor, and she was like, "Okay, well, I'm not sure, but we'll refer you 2 weeks away." And I couldn't bear that thought of waiting, and I ended up being seen that afternoon by a private consultant, thanks to cover with work and things, and it just escalated. By the end of that day, we hadn't had the confirmation, but it was pretty clear. It was the Friday before the bank holiday weekend, which was just the most agonising kind of end of the Friday. Right, we'll have the results for you, Emma, on Tuesday. I'd had the biopsy, ultrasound, but it was, I knew.
So at the time when you were first diagnosed, you had triplets.
So the triplets were 6 months old.
They were 6 months old. Wow.
And Jake was nearly 7, and I was absolutely in that. I also just separated from their dad, so it was a particularly. I was already kind of at rock bottom, really.
So you were on your own with 4
he moved
children.
out, and I went to the doctors, I think, that week. Because it was almost like I couldn't, I think that was another reason why I didn't deal with it very quickly, because there was just so much going on. And I had the diagnosis as a newly single parent.
Tell me first, what happened in terms of your treatment?
So and my tumour was it was a 5 centimetre tumour in my right breast, and a small amount of lymph node involvement. So, and I remember finding this bit weird. Everyone I knew who'd gone through it had their surgery and then chemo, and I had to have the chemo first to shrink the tumour because it was that borderline size.
And I've seen pictures of you with
you lost your hair. So I lost my hair very quickly. There was no point in me trying the cold cap or anything. It was like, your hair's going to go. And actually, that was the least of it, really. At that point, that was just the least of my worries.
I've seen some amazing pictures on your Instagram, actually, of Emma being so brave, and you're just kind of standing there.
It's funny, with when I had no hair, I wasn't one of those women that were like, this is me with my bald head. I really, really wasn't. Those photos that you've seen, that's the only. My brother-in-law took those pictures, and I remember finding it. There's a picture of me crying. I found it incredibly painful, even with close family. I never let anyone see me.
Really?
Yeah, it's a funny one, and I think if I ever have to go through that again, maybe it's vanity. I don't know. I was always very self-conscious, even though I actually knew I didn't look too bad. I think I had quite a nice shaped head.
So you had chemotherapy.
Had the chemotherapy, and then I had. A mastectomy and reconstruction, which was very intense, the kind of recovery from that. And that was a very difficult patch because the babies, by the time I had the mastectomy, they were sort of 10 months old. But you can't pick up, you can't hold them. And of course I was at home, not able to pick up my babies, they were still awake through the night. But anyway, so that recovery was very difficult. and then moved on to however many weeks of radiotherapy, I can't remember, 3, 4.
I went through the chemotherapy, but I didn't lose my hair.
Yeah.
And I had operations as well.
Yeah.
Mine had travelled to my lungs, so I've had like lung operations and bowel operations. And it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster, isn't it?
Yeah.
Telling my children that I had cancer was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. I kind of get very, very emotional just talking about it now. And I remember very distinctively taking them to a restaurant, sitting them down, and my children were 7 and 9 at the time, and telling them at 7 and 9...
And that's old enough, isn't it?
And that's old enough. They understand what the word cancer is.
Yeah.
And they understand that people die from cancer. And for them, it conjures up all these very scary connotations.
Yeah.
So I have obviously one question to you. How did you tell your children? And then to viewers at home as well, like, how did you go about telling your children? Is there a right and a wrong way? I know people who haven't told their children. So I'd love to hear your views, but how did you tell your children?
It's so interesting what you say, because I think that age thing, you know, Jake was 7. Yeah. So the triplets obviously were babies, so I wasn't telling them anything. But with Jake, it really was, I can't.
You can't
there's no way of not telling him now. And of course, also I knew I was going to lose my hair. So, and actually, I don't know if you remember. You're younger than me, or anyone remember Jade Goody? Do you remember when Jade Goody passed away? Yeah. And that was a year before my diagnosis, and it was on the news. It was everywhere. I remember Jake being really taking that in as well. And so I bought a book. I went online, and there was a book called Mummy's Lump. So I thought, right, this is how I'm going to do it, you know. And I called him in, and we sat down together in the kitchen, and I put this book there, and he wasn't interested. He was wearing a Spider-Man costume. He didn't even know about a book called Mummy's Lump. And I said, that was it. I said, darling, there's been a lot going on lately, hasn't there? All these people have been coming to the house, and Mummy's been going to appointments, and maybe you're wondering why. I've got a lump. I didn't use the cancer word.
You didn't
use the cancer word. It makes me go goosey. I still struggle with that. I think maybe I still struggle. I didn't use that word. I said, Mummy's got a lump, and the doctors, a nasty lump maybe, I said. The doctors are going to give Mummy lots of strong medicine, which is going to make the lump go away, but I'm going to lose my hair, so I might look a little bit silly for a while. That was the kind of, and he literally was like, okay, you know, what's for dinner?
Can I go play for everyone else?
Yeah. He just, that was it. And then he didn't ever really mention it again at that point. And then I remember a few weeks later when my hair started falling out, that was a moment, because I talked to you about my not really being always covering my hair, and one morning he came down, he just yanked my kind of cap off, and he sort of shrieked and fell back on the carpet. And
it's heartbreaking, isn't it? And how
but
did you...
I did what I desperately did what I could. He handled it. It breaks my heart. I mean, he handled it.
Like, kids are so robust sometimes, aren't they? Like, my children surprisingly handled it really well.
I look at your beautiful kids, and I think they just, and I suppose it is that blessing, they're in the moment, aren't they?
Yeah. I think actually it probably draws us quite nicely onto the mental aspect.
Yeah.
So tell the viewers, and tell me really briefly in terms of, so you got into remission, didn't you?
Everything went really well. So I finished sort of the main bulk of treatment and just tried to pick up life with life. And physically, you know, young, strong, had always been fit. I recovered, I bounced back physically.
And you had triplets who are now, what, 1?
Kind of 1.5, you know. And so then life was just, but, you know, the
And you were still a single mum?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. The mental side of it was torturous. For me, crippling.
In terms of the
fear. The permanent sort of ongoing fear of recurrence and what I felt that would mean. Yep. You know, in my sort of in my very black and white way of looking at, like, if anything happens again, that's it. It's the end. That's it.
Game over.
You know, not kind of.
But
I'll deal with it if it happens.
I think cancer is one of those things where until you have to find out about it, you don't, and you kind of don't want to. But the sad thing is that 1 in 2 of us will get cancer. Yeah. But the positive thing is, because of research,
the advances
in medicine, even with stage 4 cancer, and we now know that even with certain types of stage 4 kind of breast cancer and bowel cancer, you can live long and very good lives because of advances in medicine.
So I just was hitting the 5-year mark, which, you know, that kind of, I remember my oncologist saying there is no magical 5 year, but we're led to believe, aren't we, that the kind of 5-year mark, then you're you're out of the woods and it's business as normal. And just as I sort of hit that point, it was feeling fantastic, was really getting my life back on track. The kids had started school. It was like, wow, I've done it. I was exercising, I was juicing, I was started to date a little bit. Life felt really good and open-ended.
You felt like in a good place.
And then I found out I found out that my cancer had come back. It came back again. I could go off on a tangent, but it came back. What I later found out was a localized recurrence. It came back in the skin, but it hadn't gone anywhere else.
Okay.
But do you know what? I don't know if anyone else is like me. My fear of knowledge was so great that I didn't even ask that question.
For
so long. And because something had shown up on my lung, which turned out not to be
cancerous. Okay.
But for so long, I thought they were keeping it. For about a year, I was convinced that I had something going on in my lung, but because I hadn't asked, they weren't telling me. You know, I kind of...
Yeah, you can build it.
It sounds bonkers, but it's like that is the way I functioned. And I remember being at the Marsden only a couple of years ago, maybe even last year, and the oncologist saying, well, it was a localised recurrence, and the amount of disease that returned was a small amount. Yeah. And I was like, oh, but why didn't anyone tell me that? Yeah. It's like, well, I didn't ask.
It's amazing how your mind can jump. Like when so my cancer spread from my bowels to my lungs, as I mentioned earlier. And the day I was told that, I was like, well, that's game over.
Yeah.
And
that's what I felt.
Honestly, I planned my funeral. I went home, I started writing letters, and I thought that was it, actually. And then I realised that there were still options, and I think as soon as there are still options, you definitely have hope. Now, you have done something which I think is amazing in terms of you've started writing about it, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've written a book, which is incredibly exciting, a bit of a dream come true. I've always written, I've always wanted to have writing at the forefront of my work, and I've never really managed it, kind of done bits and pieces here and there. And
it's helped you, right?
It's been an amazing, it sounds corny, you know, it has been very cathartic. I know everyone uses that word. It's been tough, you know, I've written chapters with tears streaming down my face, but it's been brilliant to be able to tell the story. And it's interesting because I wrote it, my health, luckily, even though I'm on sort of lifelong maintenance treatment, my health has been stable for a while. Yeah. You know, there's all that uncertainty, but I've been in a good place for quite a while. And so writing the book in a good place has been, I don't know how I would have found it if I was writing the book with things feeling a little bit more bleak. I think that would have been possibly much, much harder, because I've always found when I'm going through a health crisis, a crisis with it, I almost can't even bear it makes it too real to put the words down.
Okay.
Whereas if I can write with a little bit of distance, and you know, then I can
almost imagining it's happening to someone else.
I can connect with the pain of it and the fear, but it's kind of not how I'm currently. It's a very.
What will people get? Because your book's out in.
His book's out in August. It's called, again, the sort of anxiety theme. It's called All That Followed. All That Followed: A Story of Cancer, Kids, and the Fear of Leaving Too Soon.
Wow, I can't wait to read it personally. I'm kind of incredibly excited. But from a parental perspective, because I'm hoping that there's lots of parents watching this who don't have cancer, but there might be some who do have cancer. What can they get from it in terms of kind of maybe helping them get through, their cancer experiences and helping children in their darkest moments? I think
it's just the honesty. I think I don't know how to write in a way that isn't completely honest. So I think it's very raw, and it's probably quite maybe a painful read in places, because I do write a lot about my fear of death and my fear of leaving the kids, and how it doesn't end on even though my life, it ends in a lovely there's a personal happiness to the end of the book, but there's no happy ending in terms of the fear hasn't gone, or the treatment hasn't stopped. So it's a kind of feeling of I feel really strongly that I know that 8 years ago, if I'd had access to social media, to the kind of platforms that there are now, I would have got so much comfort from knowing that mums can live a sort of long, happy life despite either an initial diagnosis, a new diagnosis, ongoing treatment, that it isn't, like you said, it isn't the end, and that we can still be the best mums we can be. Goosebumps again. Because that's all we want, isn't it?
I think that's the challenge, and people, regardless of what the challenge is, whether that is cancer, whether that is not simply, but bringing up triplets, bringing up a child, and we all have our challenges, don't we? And it's kind of we want to do the best that we can. And the thing that I find amazing about cancer is that it's very real. So I was just looking at a statistic here, and in the USA, for example, approximately 2.85 million children under the age of 18 are living with a parent that is affected by cancer. It makes it so real when you think...
You feel like you're the only one.
You feel we know that you're not, but when you look at that staggering statistic, I just think... It definitely gets you. So for people that are listening, what advice can we give in terms of kind of, how can you get through those darkest moments?
Nothing, I don't think anything, as I'm sure you know, that 3 o'clock in the morning, the dark hours, no one can really take those dark thoughts away. I don't know there's no answer to that personally. But I think in terms of just letting people in, saying yes to the help, talking, and maybe I'm not the best example because, being a little bit braver than I am.
I think you're amazing because I think you're being so honest about the fact that I'm
so scared.
I think we all are, though. I look at your story and dealing with three young babies and then an older son, and then the day-to-day life is more than enough for me. And you did it as a single mum and with cancer on top.
I think actually, in hindsight, I realised that maybe it was a blessing because the routine was so demanding, so all-consuming, round-the-clock feeds, getting Jake to school. They weren't sleeping through the night. I had no choice but to keep that going.
You have to get up.
There wasn't one day, and that doesn't make me a hero, but there wasn't one day during the chemo months where I didn't get dressed because actually...
Well, you didn't have a choice,
I didn't have a choice, but I remember the feeling of achievement when, I'd drop Jake at school and I'd get back, but they did keep me going. It sounds again like a bit of a cliche, but the routine kept me going, and the days and the weeks felt torturously slow and painful a lot of the time. But those months went by, and the babies were growing, and everything. There was just so much to think about.
I think we've all had those moments. Slotting it in. We've all had those moments, haven't we? And especially if you're undergoing treatment. I've had moments on chemotherapy where you cannot get out of bed, and you are horizontal, and you're feeling really rubbish, and then your son or daughter... I had a situation where my daughter runs in and says, "It's book day and I need this outfit and it needs to be ready in 12 hours." And when you're just thinking, I can't, I just want to cry. But the reality is that actually you just do it, don't you?
When you have no choice. I mean, there were times where I would put a call out for help, and I would be... And I'm not pretending that I was, I did have lots of lovely offers of the kind of, well, look, let's get Jake to school this morning so that you don't have to leave the house. But there were lots of those branches and gestures of help. But basically every day it was me keeping things going.
So Emma, tell me, in terms of when the cancer came back, in terms of your reoccurrence, how did that change? Did you, like the first time round, did you just get your head down, get on with it? Or was it a different experience for you?
It was really different. Physically, it floored me in a way that I don't know how I did get up the first time round and push the buggy, and I don't know, because I just, days and days and days, whole weekends kind of in bed, bed bound, so weak, barely, not functioning really. The chemo just felt very, very brutal. And I don't know whether that's because it was more brutal or whether fact that the children were all at school, that I was able to kind of crash.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite as much in that survival kind of, and I was much more terrified the second time
Did you feel
round.
guilty about that? Because
Hugely.
I think I occasionally feel, and I don't know about viewers at home, do you feel guilty sometimes if you're experiencing treatment and you know what it's like when you cannot get out of bed? I feel guilty for that. Just in terms of, life is going on, but I can't physically be there.
Yeah.
And
you're not present, and you're either not present physically because you're at the hospital, or you're in bed, or emotionally you might not be present because you're feeling so low or so scared or so distracted, or that you're waiting for a call from the hospital and the kids, you can't, you're...
I'll snap at people, so I'll snap at my children all the time.
So irritable and angry because
you're
so scared.
Because I'm thinking they're worried about whether their socks are matching, and I'm thinking I'm worried about whether I'm going to see you grow up.
And it's not their fault. And then you put them to bed, and then you sort of, in the evening, you think, well, I'm just as well as feeling so scared and upset, you also feel like a terrible mum, which we know we're not, but I've not been the mum that I want to be in a lot of occasions over the last few years, and I feel like I've taken out my fear. I think I don't feel like it's made me a better mum.
But I think all of us can relate to that. I know I can, in terms of we always compare ourselves, don't we, to people who we think totally have it all sorted. And I think the key thing is, regardless of as a parent, regardless of cancer aside, I think it's okay not to be okay, and to have those moments where you just feel like, actually, I'm not being the best parent I can, but that's okay for today, And be kind to yourself.
I know, it's easier said than done though, isn't it?
What other things, and I'm sure we can both throw in a few options here, to do that we can help, that might give that person a bit of a boost, or what are the things not to do? Because I can certainly think of some things not to do.
I think, like I might have said, it's that thing of just anything that you do, maybe without expecting that person to tell you what they need, because they're probably so consumed with everything else. Any lovely the time, listening, the lovely gestures. It doesn't have to be dramatic, expensive. It's just the unexpected things. It is the things like, I'm in the supermarket. Can I drop you something by? Do you need anything? And you sit there, I'm going to empty the dishwasher.
I would say don't ask, and I think don't ask, just do it. One of my things would be to remember that people like myself, people like Emma, are still us. So before cancer, I still, did my hair, put on lipstick, liked a glass of wine, whatever it might be. I enjoyed sport. But I still like those things. I still like clothes. I still like dressing up.
You want to feel nice. You want to look good. And
I think sometimes people forget, and I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel that I'm defined by cancer a little bit. And I think if you've got a friend, remember that they are still them, and act normally. They don't want to always talk about cancer.
And I think also one thing, and maybe it's me being sensitive, but the question, we don't always want to be asked repeatedly, well, what have the doctors said? What have they said? And it's like, or the kind of head to one side, and how it's like, let's talk about normal things. You tell me your news, make me laugh, tell me what's going on.
Tell me about your latest date.
Tell me about what's going on.
I'm interested. How do you go on Tinder with 4 children? And
I did not go on Tinder. I did a very little bit of...
I'm just asking,
No, I did very tentative kind of a little bit of online dating, which I was terrified of, but it was...
I would be terrified doing it single. I mean, luckily I met my husband before this whole thing. But what do you put on your profile? Cancer, couple of kids, triplets.
Triplets, cancer. So that was a big, and certainly the one person that I was seeing, he ended it in the way that I knew would happen. It was a kind of, you've got a lot going on, and I'm not. We're on, it's like.
I think absolutely hats off to you in terms of that.
And you, and every, there are. I think even just by having this conversation, the reminder and the realization that. There is just so many of us, aren't there? There are so many of us going through similar things.
I'm really interested to hear your views, and I'm sure Emma is as well. Cancer is unique, and unfortunately, like I said before, 1 in 2 of us experiencing it or will experience it in our lifetime. And on top of that, pretty much all of us will be touched by cancer in some way. And we have to go through, I suppose, our cancer, I hate the word journey, but navigate living with cancer. And I do mean living with cancer, regardless of what the prognosis is. I certainly don't know what the future holds for me. And I think it's, the more we can talk about it, the more we can share our stories and demystify it, the more you'll realise that you're not alone. Emma, thank you so much for joining us here today on Nurture, and thank you for joining us. Please, we want to hear from you, so do comment below and share your experiences and stories, and we can't wait to see you here next time on Nurture. What?